Hey folks, it's Rob Flux here for yet another Sunday session. We've got a cracking one for you today. Now you'll notice that I am in slightly different scenery. I'm actually coming to you from my hotel room here in Sydney. Sunny Sydney, I have to say, has been putting on the weather for me this week. Have been down to, I guess, kickstart our physical live events once again, now that COVID's actually letting borders open and the like. That said, we have got a cracking presentation today. We're going to be talking to you all about Feng Shui mastery and all the things that you need to know if you want to bring, I guess, energy and harmony and all those sorts of things to your particular projects. And so in order to do that, we have a Feng Shui master, Jane Langoff. So Jane, welcome aboard.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for having me here. Great to be here with your community.
Thank you. For everyone's awareness, I'm sitting on a bed, balanced on a suitcase here. So if I fumble with a couple of buttons, please forgive me. But we are going to try and put on a really good show for you. So, Jane, tell me all about, I guess, what is Feng Shui, firstly?
Well, firstly, what is Feng Shui? The way we pronounce it, there are a few different ways. It's Feng Shui, Feng Shui, Feng Shui, or Feng Shui. So different ways depending on which region you're coming from. But definitely not Feng Shui, nothing to do with shoes, or not Feng Shui. But what Feng Shui is, it's about your relationship with your environment, your surroundings, and how you can maximize that to support success. So Feng Shui originated in China thousands of years ago, and it's the result of ancient Chinese masters discovering that certain patterns of energy affected people depending on which sort of arrangements they were in. And what they found is that when people were in areas that had good energy, they experienced periods of good luck. And when they were aligned with misfortune or obstacles, they experienced bad luck. So, Feng Shui is about your relationship with your environment and your surroundings and how that affects your mood, psychology, and luck.
Very good. So thank you for that, and my humble apologies for pronouncing it incorrectly. Now, you are, I guess, a Feng Shui master. So what does it take to be a master?
Oh, it takes a lot of study to be a master. And the study never stops. So I've been at it for the last 15 years, and I'm an internationally accredited Feng Shui master, and I got my accreditation through one of the associations, which is the International Feng Shui Association, which is based in Singapore, and we go through a accreditation process to get that, and that's one way of becoming a master, and there are other traditional ways of becoming a Feng Shui master, and that is when you work with directly as with a Feng Shui master as like a master and apprentice. Traditionally, that's how people became Feng Shui masters in the past, but now you don't really come across that these days. It's more like you study. It's in different systems now, so you study and get accreditation.
Very good. So now my understanding as an outsider to, this world is that, there's the more traditionalist way of doing Feng Shui, and then there's, the bastardized ways that the Americans have done it.
Yes.
Because they've effectively taken shortcuts, as I understand it, to try and simplify it and dumb it down to, make it a little bit more marketable, a little bit more palatable to those less informed. What are some of the myths and misconceptions that come from that, disjointed approach?
Yeah, well, that's very perceptive that you've picked up on that. There are a lot of misconceptions about Feng Shui, and one of them is that you need lucky objects to bring about good energy in your environment. And Feng Shui is associated with some superstitions and religion, but true Feng Shui is not. It's based on formula and arrangement, and there are cultural aspects to Feng Shui because it's originated in China, and there are cultural aspects that are associated with a lot of those beliefs. But there are systems and there are calculations, and every property has a unique map of energy that indicates how that energy is going to impact on, somebody's wealth, health, and the state of their relationships. So it's not that the simplified versions of feng shui that are out there are very cookie cutter and standardized. So what you'll find is that the floor plan will be, you'll look at somebody's house and, for example, the front door is labelled as the career sector, and there's one sector there that's for wealth, and it's the same in every single house. And the fact is that's simply not true, because every home is different based on the orientation, the age of the building, the actual layout itself, the arrangement of the rooms, and also the energy of the people who live in the home based on their birth dates and things like that.
So there's quite a bit to it. So when you say a map, it's not like we can, with our Google Maps, just turn up and kind of see it. We need someone like you to come in and, using the formulas that you're actually talking about, try to, I guess, decode what's kind of hidden underneath, hiding in plain.
That's right. So what I would produce for a client is a map of energy over the top of their floor plan that divides the floor plan into 8 sectors based on their, the directions of north, south, east, and west, and all of the intermediate directions also. And from there, we do some calculations that produce a set of numbers. And these numbers indicate the configuration of energy in each particular sector. So there might be a sector there that, well, there is a sector that relates to wealth. So that's the wealth sector. And we're always interested in the wealth sector and how we can charge that up and where it is. If it's at the front door, that's a really good location for, energetically indicates good support for finances. But if it's in a place like the toilet, well, not so good, unfortunately.
But can happen that's the place, I'm assuming.
Yes, absolutely. It does happen, and I do see that. And I also see some floor plans also have that wealth sector cut off. So some properties, for example, those that are very long and skinny, they would have more, you would find that there's more of an emphasis on some sectors at the front and the back of the building, and those at the sides tend to be all sort of squashed up and small and not really usable. So, it's really important to know what energy is being activated, and with things like the wealth sector, for example, they're activated by water. So if you've got a swimming pool in your wealth sector, then that helps to activate that energy. And then you need to look at, well, what's the state of the water? Is it stagnant? Is it fresh? Is it Sydney Harbour? Is it full of, is it a swamp? So there's so many aspects to consider that can impact on that energy that's in your environment.
So you're talking about charging up a space. So I guess there's, I'm assuming there's a natural level of energy, and then there's, hey, what can we do to actually enhance what's there and bring out, I guess the natural elements that are sitting underneath. So
yes,
what are the things that we can do to charge up our energy?
So in a feng shui consultation, when we're looking at the intangible energy, which is the energy map that I mentioned, we use the 5 elements that are used in metaphysics: fire, earth, metal, water, and wood. And we would use those in a particular sort of way to enhance positive energy, and also you could use them in a certain way to reduce the impact of negative energies as well. So, for example, if you have a lot of conflict and arguments occurring in a particular sector of the home, then you may need a fire element there. But you have to be careful with fire.
Not too much fire when there's conflicts.
No, we don't want too much fire. And by fire, I mean, we use the color red, and the color red is symbolic of the fire formula, of the fire element, and that's what we use for certain energies to either enhance them or reduce the impact. But we have to be careful about fire. As fire and water, we need to be careful with those particular elements. So there are certain elements that are used to affect different types of energies in a property. But we also need to take into consideration the arrangement of a property as well. And if there are, negative presentations in terms of the layouts from a Feng Shui perspective, then there might be ways that we can make adjustments from in terms of the layout, format, furnishings, and so forth. And things that are practical, not sort of silly things like silly things that don't make sense.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned before the 5 elements, and you also mentioned that there were, I guess, multiple sectors. So health, wealth, harmony, relationships. What else from a sector's perspective? And I'm hoping I got the right terminology. What other elements are there that we can?
There are many different energies, intangible energies that sort of present themselves in a floor plan, and there is no kind of one set pattern. That's more. There's no one set standardized pattern. So really, when we're looking to improve the energy of a home, we're looking at it in terms of the rooms and the functions of the rooms and what areas the occupants are using most. So, for example, the front door generally, the energy at the front door generally indicates how supportive the home is for finances. So we analyse that and come up with the solutions that are required there. We look at the bedroom. The bedroom is really important for health and relationships. So we would look at the intangible energy in the bedroom and also the stuff that you can see and the layouts and, what's behind the bed head and, where are the doors facing? Do you have a bathroom door that's aligned with your bed or that sort of thing? So there's many different energies. So, we could.
And we're going to touch on some of the things.
So really, when we're looking to, there's many different energies.
We're going to touch on a couple of things. Sorry, a little glitch in the background. We're going to touch on some of the things that enhance a home, and I guess some things to try and avoid and that sort of thing in a couple of moments. But more importantly, why would we be doing all of this in the first place? As property developers, we're really clearly interested in, I guess, making our homes more attractive, to our certain markets and demographics. So you mentioned, I guess, Chinese history as to how and where this has started, but I'm assuming it's not just the Chinese that are going to get an advantage from Feng Shui.
No, and everybody can get advantage from using Feng Shui, but Asian cultures in general are very sort of sensitive to the Feng Shui elements in a home, and will be very quick to judge a property based on whether they believe the property will be one that brings them good fortune or one that is just a sort of a disastrous property. So it's really important, I think, to make sure that you get those elements correct so that you're not alienating certain buyers from the market. And we're not just talking about Chinese market, we're also talking about a lot of Asian cultures, most of them, and also there are many non-Asian people who are very interested in Feng Shui and don't want to have these negative presentations in their home, possibly affecting their energy and their luck and the fortune of their family.
Okay, so we've got a few of the elements that are sitting here. We're starting to kind of piece together, I guess, the components. But you mentioned before that there's actually a formula to this. And so when we get the components, it's not like throwing it out on the floor and like a jigsaw puzzle, you just kind of pick up the pieces. What's the magic formula? Like is it
Oh,
3 times 5 equals 72? Or give us the stuff.
well, the thing is, Rob, it's not that easy to answer, and it's dependent on the information that you have about the property. And there are many different feng shui formulas that you can incorporate into a home, and it's quite a complex process. So it's not something that we can just give to you like a 3 times 5 thing. And there's so many things to overlay in assessing the feng shui formula as well, and how effective the energy map actually will present based on the arrangement and based on the landform and all of those elements that I mentioned, including the energy of the people who are living in the home. So yeah, many people are surprised to find out that it's not just a matter of, dividing your home into sort of 9 blocks and saying, well, this is the space for helpful people and I'm going to whack a crystal or whatever it is in this particular sector to improve that energy. It's really a lot. There's
actually
a lot to
a process to it.
There's a process. There's a process, and also it's worth mentioning that different feng shui masters and feng shui consultants have different processes and different areas of focus when they're looking at a feng shui consultation, because feng shui is not one of those easy things to master. There are so many different schools. It's not like going to uni and studying accounting, for example, and debit's a debit and a credit's a credit. It's an esoteric art and science, and and as I mentioned, I've been at it for a long time and studying from many different masters who have different focuses, and it's about bringing all of those things together and figuring out, well, what's right for this application and what's right for these particular people.
So from I guess an execution perspective, then I guess the process, I'm guessing, has a few steps. So it's, I guess, find the property. How is the property oriented? I guess with regards to north, south, east, west, that sort of thing. How is that going to, I guess, determine the frontage? How's that going to then, when you overlay your map, you said 8 sectors that sit over the map. That's then going to shine a light on certain parts of the building. Is that have I got the process kind of, I guess, in a very simplistic way?
Yes, that's right. Exactly. So yeah, what I do when I come into a consultation is I have my compass, which is a very detailed compass that we figure out what the orientation is to the degree of the home. So it's not good enough just saying, well, it's facing south. So from there, I would run the formulas based on that and the age of the building and the layout, and come up with that configuration of energy, and then see how the arrangement of the property affects those energies and what the arrangement actually tells us in terms of yin and yang, and what can we do to improve it, to make it feel better when people walk into the home, to improve that appeal. So, really feng shui should be consistent with the principles of good design, and not to be, some people are concerned that it's going to make their property weird, or, it doesn't relate to them because they're not Chinese, but it's not true. It's all about just maximizing that energy flow and making it feel great.
Very good. So now that said, there's a few little tips and tricks when we're coming to see a site to see whether or not we've got the potential to maximize, I guess, the best energy flow there. And we're going to come to some of those little tips in a sec. But I want to pick up on, you said before the yin and the yang, but you also said charging up. So is there an opposite of that, to say, look, we want to actually de-emphasize something?
That's right. So we need to enhance, and we also need to reduce the impact of challenging energy that we find. So if there's an energy there that relates to sickness, well, we want to reduce that as much as possible. And one way we can do that is consider, well, is what's the function of the room? Have you got a room that's, that there might be sickness energy that relates to somebody if they use it as a bedroom, but if you use it as a study or an office, there might be prosperous energy in that particular area. So from there we figure out, well, what is the best arrangement based on those energies, and also what works in terms of the layout of the property, in terms of, where's the light coming from? We got north to the rear, or have we got natural light in the living spaces, and the other sort of bedrooms darker? What works well with the functions of the room in terms of the physical layout as well as the energetic layout.
So all of this so far has been assuming that the house already exists, right?
Yes.
So how do we maximize what already exists? Now, we're property developers. We get the, I guess, the power of making new stuff, right? So is this something that if we were to engage with you early on in the process, we could actually design to a point where we can actually emphasize and enhance the areas naturally within the design?
Absolutely. And it's a good point you raised there, Rob, because it is the best time to engage with a Feng Shui consultant at the concept stage of design. Even potentially before, if you're deciding between a couple of different properties, there might be one that has better energy than the other. So it's worth considering that. But I often deal with people who are, about to sell their home, or in the selling process of their property, and the real estate agent will call me and say, hey, the prospective buyers have said this place has bad feng shui, can you come and fix it? Well, after it's been built and it's ready, there's only a limited amount that you can really do. The best time is really when the designs are just lines on a page.
So, taking on board what you said before, I'm assuming that it's yourself with the architect, as opposed to you just coming and saying, put your bedroom there, and the architect having to work around that, because there's a flow of the house itself, and making sure that I guess people can come and go in a way that feels natural. So.
Of course, and as I mentioned earlier, you need to have that good design. If you are, if there's a good energy sector in a spot of the home that is completely impractical to activate, you don't do it. You need to. The overarching thing is that it needs to be a design that makes sense, and if the feng shui principles and the solutions can add to that and elevate the appeal, then you incorporate that, and that's when you can take it. You can really maximize the potential of a property.
So, with all that said, there's we're capturing all the elements here. There's a lot of the things that would probably be myths that need debunking. So, what are the myths that people hear that are just categoric lies? What are the things that we should be ignoring when we hear about feng shui, and what are the elements of truth that, and how do we actually flesh the meat on the bones on that?
Well, things like I mentioned before that you don't need the tacky lucky objects. You don't need to have a water feature in your home or in your property to feel like you've got good luck. Some people come to me with the idea that they need to have an aquarium and a pool and a fountain. It's simply not true. You don't need all that. You don't need all this stuff. It's really just about really good, smart design with those feng shui principles in mind. But there are a lot of sort of do's and don'ts, I guess. And for example, if you place your bed, let's say you've got your bed placed in front of a door, aligned with the door, that's called the coffin position, known as the coffin position in from a Feng Shui perspective. It doesn't mean you're going to die. Okay, so there's a myth. You're not going to die, but it is not a good. It's not a good presentation to have your bed in a position where it's right in front of the door. So you want to make sure that you just close the door and move the bed to a different spot, or design the room so that it's not in direct alignment. Things like having the front and the back door aligned as well, which indicates money. You can't hold on to money and leakages of finances. Well, those are things that you need to be aware of when you're designing a home. That you want to make sure that the energy is meandering through a property. And I guess another myth is, well, that Feng Shui is not important, and I really think it is. It's just very important if you're wanting to maximize the people that you're marketing your property to.
So, thank you, appreciate that. So, what we've got for everyone is a little tips sheet, I guess a free download. So I'm going to kind of click on that so we can actually see it in the YouTube channel here, but I'm also going to paste that into our Facebook group so people don't have to try and memorize it. So no matter which channel you're on, hopefully I can actually do that and multitask all at the same time. Can I think and breathe? Yes, I can. That's all done. So there's a free little download. But what we're going to do now is trying to give people what are the things that make for a bad Feng Shui experience when we're coming to do some site analysis, and then what are the things that, I guess, the opposite of that, what are the good things? So let's start with the bad, because we want to make sure that we're avoiding
Yes.
those sorts of problems. So we want to do a development on a site. We see a site that looks like a cracking deal, going to make us plenty of money, but the shape of the block has got a huge amount to do with whether or not Feng Shui principles can actually be enhanced. So give us some insights into that.
Yeah, that's right. So with the shape of the block, it's ideal to have something that's a regular shape. So rectangles tend to be good, or not sort of things that have come to a sharp point like a triangle. Generally not the best. You don't want to have a triangle because it indicates an uneven distribution of energy. But there are some auspicious presentations in terms of property shape, and one of those, for example,
why don't we save the auspicious ones for?
Okay.
Yeah, we're just doing the bad stuff.
The bad stuff. Okay, the bad stuff. All right. It depends on what the property is. It depends on what the property is, but we tend not to like properties that are at the end of a T junction. Okay.
Great.
T junction. What else? We like properties that are not that are not on obviously busy roads. As property developers, it's easier to as property developers, like on busy roads, I guess units are more likely to go up, and from that perspective, you can sort of enhance or try and avoid some of those negative issues of the traffic flow and so forth by having a large solid building, which is generally better than a house, I guess. So busy roads is another thing. What else have we got?
So the slope of the block you mentioned the other day.
Slope of the block, yes.
And one of the things that we commented on was the fact that as a property developer, we tend to refer to it sloping in one direction. You refer to it sloping in the same direction, but use different terminology. So
yeah, just so that the layperson can understand. We prefer to have. We don't like to have land that slopes away at the back. So where it's lower at the back than it is at the front, just because that indicates that the energy can't be contained and that there's money leaks out of the property. You can't hold on to your wealth when you've got a property that's like that. However, it depends. You know, there's no, as I mentioned earlier, there's no one size fits all. If you've got a property that is facing the harbour, it's not necessarily a bad thing. The property slopes away from the
one
street.
bad thing can be overcome with a better good thing.
Well, that's right.
Yes.
That's right. Ideally, you want the property with. I'm going into something good now. To have land sloping up at the back, but not too steep. Not too steep.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. So we don't want to have a property that's got a cliff behind it. Yeah, and we like protection. So things that properties that are exposed to too much energy, even those that are on the top of a cliff or right on the, even beachfront properties that are right on the beach where the water can erode the land. That's not a good thing, being exposed to the open ocean. Not the best. It's better to be in a area that's calmer and more contained, such as, if you're in Sydney, Balmoral, eastern suburbs, Rose Bay, those sorts of areas where it's lovely and contained and calm. You've got some land in front but beautiful clean water. I guess also we want to avoid things like obviously rubbish dumps and those high tension electrical pylons, things like that are regarded as negative issues from a Feng Shui perspective.
There's also a couple of layout elements that we were touching on the other day when we were chatting. So when the stairs are running towards the front door, that in itself is not a good thing. What's the bad stuff that comes from that?
Well, again, that's about not being able to hold on to finances. It's like money runs out the door when you've got the stairs in direct alignment with the front door, and also when you've got the stairs in direct alignment with the back door, and also in alignment with the view or the window. So, ideally we want to contain that energy at the front so that it's not immediately exposed. You don't have everything immediately exposed as soon as you open the front door.
Yep. And open plan living is one of those things that architects love, promoting and that sort of thing. But when you have it way too open and you get to the front door and you can see all the way through the house and can see out the back door and beyond, is that a good or a bad thing?
It's not great. I think I mentioned yin and yang and the balance of yin and yang, and we want to balance openness and enclosure with the meandering energy flow. So my architect, for example, he was always talking about making sure that you've got an area that you can close off, that when the kids have got the TV going and people are being noisy, that you can close off those doors and sit and read and feel peaceful. Otherwise, some people tend to go a bit mad when there's just too much noise going around. And it's something that we've experienced with COVID as well, in having to find rooms and places where we can do things like this, like Zoom calls, and everybody's got a space that they can enclose. So I think that balance of openness and enclosure is very important. It's not a good thing to have full open plan throughout the whole house. So there are certain areas that should be more contained and those that should be more open. So I guess bedrooms should be more contained and generally smaller, and living spaces should be larger and more open.
Yeah, and you mentioned a couple of things with regards to bedroom layouts and things like that from a bad function perspective. So what makes a bad bedroom layout? Okay,
so practically know what's on the other side of the bed head wall. We don't want things like meter boxes and heavy electrical cabling on the bed head wall. Also, we take note of what the bed, what's sort of reflecting the bed, what's aligned with the bed. Generally speaking, we prefer not to have bathroom doors opening up onto the bed, because it indicates problems with a certain area of your body that is aligned with the bathroom. So, for example, if the bathroom is aligned with your head, can indicate things like, problems with migraines and so forth. Also, practical things in terms of the structural, beams and things like that. We don't want them cutting the bed in half. Also the relationship of the bed to the doors. We don't like mirrors reflecting the bed. This includes mirrors on the ceiling. Sorry, Rob.
for all of you 70s disco fans, that with a mirror ball up there as well. Okay, so we've talked about all the bad stuff. So let's look at good design. So what makes, I think the term you used before was an auspicious home.
Oh, yes. So one of the things that we mentioned earlier was the shape of a property. And if the property is a little smaller at the front than it is at the back, so it kind of opens up like this, a little, not a triangle, but just a little bit. It's the shape of what we call a money bag. And that's an auspicious shape because it's like the money can go in and be collected and be contained, like money in a purse, for example. Whereas if it's the opposite, it's not so good, less contained. Also, we like properties where the land is slightly sloping up and not steep, very steep slopes, but just slightly sloping up is really nice too. Again, that helps to contain that energy. So sloping up at the back. And from a building perspective, that's good too, isn't it, Rob?
I'll put that in developer speak. So you refer to slightly sloping up. We refer to that as sloping towards the road, because that's where, I guess, gravity runs downhill. So all of the things that we require to exit the property, I guess, can go out into the road. So stormwater, sewage, that sort of thing. So we refer to it as sloping towards the road. But
exactly. So that's a great example of good feng shui marrying up with great design and being practical and making sense and working.
Very good. So what about, we talked about, like, I guess the path wanting to meander through the property from the front door to the back door and that sort of thing. What do you mean by that?
Okay. Well, one of the things that I like is pathways that are not straight. So pathways that are kind of curved. So I love curves. I love curves in houses. And so that's one way. As you're approaching a property, you have a curved path. Sometimes it's not possible, but if it is, that's a great thing to incorporate into a design. And then when you're in a home, as we discussed, we don't want to see directly out the back. We want to have a contained area in the front. Something like a foyer is always the best if we have the space for that. Like a little foyer where there's a doorway or a designated path of where to go next to the other living spaces. So we don't want to be sort of moving straight from the front door to a bedroom. If possible, it's better if we can go to a little foyer and then go to a living space, so the public areas of a home. And then as you step through that home, it becomes more and more private as you go along. So, having bedrooms up the stairs is a good example of that, where you sort of contain your private spaces and you have more of your open living spaces downstairs. And then just you have a set of rooms or designs that have a good balance of furniture and to allow the energy to move nice and slowly through the home and out the back.
Very good. So what about, I guess, orientation of the home? So, do we want it to be north, south, east, west? What's the orientation of the home look like?
I have lived in all orientations, north, south, east and west. From my perspective, we live in Australia. I know there might be some internationals listening to this. So here in the Southern Hemisphere, we like to have north to the rear. So, real estate agents are always talking about that, facing north. And I like that. That is just, it's a beautiful way to live if you can. But if you can't, and it's the opposite, and you've got your living areas in the south, for example, well then you just have to be smart with the design to allow different windows to bring the natural light into the house or the property as much as possible, and that's where a good architect will help to do that.
Very good. So are there any other little tips and tricks and that sort of thing, other than, I guess, the free download that we've already given everyone before? And for those that didn't get it, here's that link again. What other little tips and tricks can we think about?
Oh, there are so many, Rob. We like to bring the outdoors in, so it's nice to have a lovely garden and also have a few plants. You can see I've got one there. Have a few plants in the home. We don't like. We have to be careful with certain things like certain objects and things like mirrors. I know some developers like to use. They still like to use mirrored cabinets. Oh, I can hear you.
Sorry, that looped back. My humble apologies.
That's all right. Do some developers still like to use mirrored robes in their?
It is actually really popular from a look and feel perspective. It tends to make a room look larger. So what is that, good or bad? Because it sounds like you're going to tell me it's bad.
No, we don't really like to be reflecting the bed when we sleep at night with a mirror. But what you could do is you could have a mirror that doesn't reflect the bed, or have the ability to tuck it away if you can. So personally, I prefer mirrors in bedrooms behind cupboard doors rather than, we don't want them reflecting the bed.
Okay.
But there are ways that you can remedy that also.
Very good. Now, there was a couple of elements with regards to stairs that we touched on before with regards to, you don't want it running towards the front door, that sort of thing. But, there's lots of different shaped stairs. What are good shapes? What are bad shapes?
Generally speaking, we want stairs that are nice and wide and comfortable to walk on, and stairs that have a landing and that are not too steep and feel like you're going to fall off and die. So spiral stairs, in general, not the best from a Feng Shui point of view, and we also like to have stairs that are sort of as I mentioned, not facing the door, but inside somewhere. Along the periphery of a house is generally better than in the middle. So we have to be careful with what's in the middle of a property as well. We prefer not to have the kitchen there. So that's also better at the periphery of the home as well. So with stair design, going back to stair design, prefer to have solid stairs with solid risers rather than open stairs. And I know they're used to bring light into certain spaces depending on the type of development and the orientation. But if we can do things like use different materials, for example, using some sort of opaque material that allows the light to go in, to go into the interior of the home, but creates that solidity of the stairs so that you don't have that openness.
Very good. Okay, well, that's been very, very informative. What we're going to do now is we're going to reach out to Facebook Land and see what sort of comments are coming through, see if there's any questions. So plenty of people actually saying hi. So hi to Luke, Matt, Carol, and a whole bunch more. Now, first question, I think, is coming from Carol. Jane, what do you ever get asked to have a look at plans before? Sorry, do you ever get asked to look at plans before development starts?
Oh, always. I'm doing one right now. I'm doing more than one right now. Yeah, I always look at the plans prior to. Generally, it's better to look at them when they're at concept stage before they've gone to the council for approval, because once they've been approved and all the stakeholders have agreed to everything, it's a bit of a difficult process to make the changes. Some developers do this and they're lucky when they come to me that sometimes they can be lucky that things are actually pretty good not too difficult to change. But yeah, definitely before development starts is the best time.
Very good. Now, we've got one that's more of a comment from Ursula, but you might have some thoughts on it anyway. She said that sometimes you feel more comfortable in homes, but in other homes you feel cold and negative. She's asked, like, is that the Feng Shui? Is that what's causing that?
It could be, absolutely. It could be something to do with the physical aspects of the building, like the orientation and just the building materials that are used, and whether the building is elevated and has got insulation underneath it. So practical considerations, but also when a room feels unnaturally cold, that could be an indication that there are spirits in the property. And I come across this in some of my consultations. And when this happens, I call the Ghostbuster.
Okay. So I'm anticipating Dan Aykroyd like whizzing in any moment now. So I've got a similar comment from Peter Henley with regards to, I guess, some apartments he's been in that are cold and depressing. So I think that's kind of the same kind of comment. Peter's asked the question, what about quite a common development strategy that we do is what we call a battle axe block. So keeping the existing house and then putting I guess another property at the back with a long driveway getting to it. Is that good or bad, or?
Generally not considered to be an auspicious shape of a property, the battle axe, because it looks like it also looks like an axe, but not the best.
Okay, so
doesn't mean that So if you can get the property at the front, that's better than the battle axe.
And if you can get it slightly narrower at the front.
if that's land works, yes.
Yeah. So Carol's got a question. What if the shape of the block is actually square, but the dwelling on it is not square?
Oh, that's fine. It's a regular shape. So that's cool. I don't have a problem with squares either. Just generally, we don't really come across squares as much as we do rectangles.
Okay. And so I'm going to add to that. What about things like, I guess the ones that we saw in the 80s where you saw the octagons and the almost the igloo type shaped ones? How do they get interpreted?
It's very difficult to live in a home that is shaped like an igloo. I mean, where are you going to hang your paintings? And how are you going to set out your furniture? It's like an inefficient use of space. There are some properties that are built that are supposedly those that have, they're built with Feng Shui in mind because they're all curved, like they're all round and curved and full of windows, but it's not practical, and you can go overboard with that sort of thing.
Yeah, fair enough. So we've got a question from Tony. He says, "Hi Jane, is the bathroom opposite the kitchen bad Feng Shui? And what can you do to attract good energy?" So two separate questions, but
the bathroom opposite the kitchen, that is generally regarded, as not being the best, okay? And the reason for that, from a practical perspective, the way that where that originated from was that, the cook goes to the loo, doesn't wash their hands, goes back to the kitchen, prepares the food, and everybody gets food poisoning. So that's kind of the origins of that one. It really depends on the arrangement of the property and the layout. I mean, if you've got a kitchen and people spend a lot of time there, and you've got a bathroom that's got no windows, and you can get unpleasant smells wafting into an area where you're spending a lot of time and trying to eat and keep your food down. It's not the best kind of layout. It's ideal to have bathrooms kind of tucked away with windows. I see so many bathrooms without windows as well. They need good exhaust fans for that to be successful.
That's just practical. That's just common
Yeah,
sense.
It is, but it brings negative energy into a space if there's no window.
Yep. Now, Matt's got a question. How do we engage you? And other than clicking on the links below, so how do we engage with Jane?
Well, yeah, just go to my website and you can send me you can send me an email. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm on Insta as well and Facebook. I'm all over the place. But if you really want to have a chat, the most direct way is to head to my website and you can send me an email or give me a call.
Very good. On all the socials. Now, lucky last question we've got from Peter. So at the end of a cul-de-sac, I guess there tends to be more triangular designs. Now,
Yes.
there's going to be multiple elements that have got that more, I guess, shape, like narrow at the front and big at the back, like you've indicated. Is there a particular spot on that cul-de-sac which is like, you don't want somebody driving all the way up and going straight up your driveway? Is it?
No, that's a really good question. And you're correct. There are parts of a cul-de-sac that are better than others. Generally speaking, cul-de-sacs have a bit of a bad rap from a Feng Shui perspective, but that's because there's only one way out. So if something happens at the top of the street, there's only one way to escape. And so you're kind of locked in. So that's the reason practically why, the Feng Shui of a cul-de-sac can be considered to be not the best. But there are so many advantages in cul-de-sacs. So I think it depends. So, but in terms of picking which block along the cul-de-sac, yes, you don't want the one that's in direct alignment with the street. So that's like being on a T-junction. So if you've got, a fast car moving towards a house, you don't want them crashing in. So those houses that are on the left or the right of that are better.
Very good. Well, so the last one is more of a comment rather than a question, and that is a hello from Karen to you. So Karen Povey has said that she's clearly engaged in services. So there, we're out to all the world, and Jane, you're everywhere. So Jane, I want to very much thank you for your time today. That's been very informative for me and hopefully for my community as well. So I'm going to catch you next time, and everyone else, we're going to catch you on our next Sunday session. So thanks, Jane, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.